and we stood there in the hallway up there at Nashville, and honest to God, three of us are closer than we are now.
Yeah.
Neither Harmon or Curry would talk to each other. Rex would say something, and I'd have to, I'd say no. It was crazy. It was, but it was fun.
And in any case, it turned out that I was the right person to write that stuff.
Yeah.
And give you an idea how well things turned out. I wrote the obituary and the other long stories about how there was one of the most distinguished people in Juneau County sports history had passed away.
Yeah.
And the family came up and they bought a dozen copies of the
They're
paper.
not staying on her.
No, you're fine.
You got enough there?
I'm just
Okay.
looking at the.
So the family came up and bought a dozen copies of the paper.
You need to go under, or you okay?
No, I think we'll be all right.
Okay.
I was saying the family bought a dozen copies of the paper, which is big for a paper that has a circulation of about 5,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're in an excellent area. Still, I would assume the short track scene is still very competitive for spectator dollars.
The kings of the sports is still the late model.
Yeah.
On pavement.
Yeah. Yep. You're lucky. You're lucky there.
The county where I work has the Dells Raceway Park. You've got Marshfield. You've got several other racetracks there. You've got that 5/8 mile track over La Crosse.
Yeah, and you're close to Madison.
Yeah,
so,
that's not too far away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. See if I can wake up.
Oh, you'll be okay.
But I'm glad.
Okay. Well, Al Stilley should have been one of the great all-time basketball stars of Speedway High School. However, Morris Pollard decided to bench him in his senior year, and finally, he decided to become a sports writer. And then he ended up working at the Indianapolis Speedrome for one of the most innovative people in sports promotional, who was John Stiles. And Al, you and Stiles had an amazing reputation for a better part of a quarter century as far as changing what American short tracks have become.
Well, John was an innovator with the special events that he came up with, because he came up with the first 3-hour figure eight, which I missed, but I took my son to. Had snow flurries during that day. I was with the Daily Journal in Franklin. At that time, I remember buying hot chocolate for my son. It was probably only 5 or 6, and by the time I got to the grandstands, it was like drinking chocolate milk. But John instigated that. He was the first place for the Thursday Night Thunder up live on ESPN, the Thursday Night Midget Series, the regional USAC Midget Series. And one of the most unique events on a short track ever held was that USAC Midget 500, where we actually brought in the portable concrete barricades off the interstates and formed a pit area in the middle of this 1/5 mile paved oval for that event. And he also did 2 races inside the RCA Dome.
Many of the things that John Stiles started back in the 1970s are now standard parts of American racing promotion. They seemed radical back in the day, but now they're just the way the business is run.
Yes, and one thing he did, we always ran some promotions where it would be a free giveaway, and you had to fill out a card, but you put your name and address on that card. At that time, he ran a very viable American electronics business in Greenwood that had it was archaic by today's standards, but he had a computer base to put names and addresses in. Well, we would use that several times a year to mail out our track publication or special information on special events as just a mail out deal. A lot of tracks were enamored by that and developed that. The other innovation he had was that, and he and I both agreed, that qualifying, other than the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and Tom Carnegie, qualifying is the most boring event you can have for spectators at a racetrack. So came up with an intricate system where we inverted the race fields for heats and features based on driver performance, and the best drivers started in the back. We used the time that would be used for qualifying, we used it for additional practice, so that when a spectator walked in 45 minutes or an hour before a race would begin, normal race time for a race to begin, he or she saw action on the track. They didn't see just one car going around at a time, and we would run a couple of figure-8 practices in there too. So from the minute the fan stepped into the grounds of the Speedrome, he or she and the kids saw action, and that's what we built that Speedrome on, was racing action. A good friend of ours, and he's still legendary in Northern Illinois, Hugh Deary, who owned Rockford Speedway, always said, you sell the sizzle, not the steak. And the 3-hour race and some of our special events were true to that. We were selling the fact, this was, a knockout, drag out, figure-8 racing, high speed, high horsepower. The spectators who would come from to that race locally probably didn't know many of the drivers, but they knew they were going to see an action-packed, action-filled event at a reasonable ticket price. And that was the key to the Speedrome success, was that even on special events, the ticket prices were very, very reasonable.
Since the opening of Indianapolis Speedrome in 1941, the track has been a hallmark as far as the viability of the idea of the weekly short pack, and shows how it works, but what happened, their styles just took it up a level.
Yes, he did. And he took it up with the high-speed figure-8 racing when many tracks got away from that. He always looked at change and was able to kind of predict change that would come along. At one time, we ran what you were familiar with, the really high-speed, high-dollar late-model cars that were built by Ed Howe up in Michigan, who built cars for ASA for years. C.J. Rayburn down at Whiteland, we ran, some of his cars were run actually on the figure-8. These at that time would have been $25,000, $30,000 cars. Stiles knew that not only the Speedrome, but short track racing in general could not support that high dollar type of race car. By rules, he got the rules down to where it became more cost effective to run in the best series we could put on the track. And then we also kind of opened the door for what we called stock class, where guys could race with a protective cage at a very, very reasonable cost. He also brought in Legends cars, which were extremely innovative, developed by 600 Racing down in Charlotte under Humpy Wheeler. Scale model of the late 1930s coupes. That car was ideal for the Indianapolis Speedrome. It could dart in and out, as were the midget race cars that raced there. But certainly a lot of innovations, a lot of new things that would attract the casual sports fan, not just the motorsports fan, but the casual sports fan